And this is free, and this is free, and this is free, and this is free, and this... Oh, well, yeah, I did pay for them at some point, but free? Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 9 of our 2025 Untangle the Stash series, where we're exploring a different method of controlling your yarn collection topic every month. In this very episode, we're going to learn how to skip the yarn store, or not, and shop from your yarn inventory. Shopping your stash is not just about saving money or stash diets. It's about falling in love with the yarn you already paid for, petted, cooed over, stored, and promptly forgot about. And yes, we all do it. I buy yarn for a future Nicole, like she's somehow a better version of right now Nicole. She's not. She's me, still distracted by new pattern releases and pretty yarn impulse buying. But future you can absolutely make present you proud. You just need a plan. Today we're going to look at where to start and how to make things work when you don't have the exact thing you're supposed to have for that pattern. As always, I have real life examples for you and some general tips. And finally, we'll talk about when a trip to the yarn store is necessary to make that must-knit project work. Yeah, because you know everything, Oscar. Okie dokie, let's get right into this. There are two main ways to stash shop. Pattern first or yarn first. Let's start with pattern first because it's probably the most common, at least for me it definitely is. You have a pattern you love, now what? First thing you're going to do is check your stash for a match. We went over this in detail in the last installment of Untangle the Stash, which was all about cataloging your yarn. As I said in that video, I use Ravelry's stash function to track my yarns, so we're going to go there and see how to use the filters to find or not the perfect yarn from my stash. I completely recognize that you may have a different system, a spreadsheet, a notebook. You might even just have your yarns in bins or bags and labeled. Whatever system you use is the right system for you. So follow along with the methods today and you can apply them to your very own method of tracking your yarn, knowing what you have and where it is. Okay. I strongly believe that learning with real life examples helps. While I was on the Rhine River cruise this summer, Janine, who is one of the owners of the Skane Sisters Yarn Shop in Sydney, Australia, caused me to stop dead in my tracks and practically accost her because she was wearing this. The Mist Shawl by Inez Sang. We're going to use this shawl as my example for shopping from my stash because I need to knit this now. I can't knit it now because I am currently knitting another shawl and I am not going to stop in the middle of that one and start this one because I said I wouldn't do that anymore. Now, before we go to Ravelry to search my stash and see what I already have that might be appropriate for this, or maybe I partly have and need something else, but we'll get to that later. I know from reading the pattern that for this bit of yumminess, I need 2 colors of fingering weight yarn. I'm going to stop right here and we're going to do a little mini lesson in yarn substitution. I want you to remember that not all fingering weight yarns are created equal. Fiber content, drape, halo, ply structure, and gauge all matter. One of the quickest shortcuts to determining yarn compatibility is to compare the grist. That's G-R-I-S-T, grist. There's a lot more to grist than I'm going to talk about right now. Jillian Moreno has a fantastic and very worth your time article on the Modern Daily Knitting website. I will put a link to it down in the description box. Go read it. Worth it. Just do it. But here's the Coles Notes version of how grist works. By the way, Coles Notes is the Canadian version of Cliff's Notes, if you're more familiar with those. Way back in the late 1950s, the Coles guys sold the rights to some dude named Cliff, but the name never changed in Canada somehow. Don't ask me why or how. I know that when I can't even remember to take my laundry out of the washing machine. Anyway, I digress. Thanks, Oscar. So here's how grist works. You divide the skein yardage by its weight to find the yardage per gram. In other words, you're looking at the yarn's density or grist. They don't have to match exactly, and by they, I mean the yarn that you have and the yarn that the pattern calls for, but you do need to be aware of subbing a light and lofty yarn, more yards per gram, for a heavy and drapey yarn, fewer yards per gram. For instance, a superwash merino will almost always weigh more than a non-superwash rustic wool. Now, the reality is that for this shawl, or most any shawl, it's not going to matter too much except for drape, and I'll get to that in a minute. But for a sweater, it can matter a lot. Case in point, these two sweaters are almost the same size and knit at close to the same gauge. This one, Through Stone by Bristol Ivy, is knit in 100% non-superwash wool and weighs just under 400 grams. The yarn's grist is 3.5. Now this sweater, a modified version of Lionheart by Shannon Cook and Jane Richmond, is knit in 100% superwash merino and weighs 570 grams. The grist is 2.19, 3.5, 2.19. That's a 6-ounce difference. The weight of 2 full skeins of yarn. 6 ounces may not sound like a lot, but these are very different sweaters to wear. I have a full masterclass on yarn substitution, but for the too long didn't read crowd, check the grist and swatch. If you have a small amount of the same type of yarn that the pattern calls for, but not enough for the project, swatch it and analyze the fabric. Then swatch the yarn you want to sub and compare the two. Are they super different, like my sweaters? Tread carefully. Don't substitute 3-ply extra twist superwash merino for a lofty rustic wool in a cable-heavy cardigan unless you want 10,000 pound cardigan syndrome. And there are no meds for that. Now that we've got all that in mind, let's go to Ravelry and take a look and see if we can find some yummy yarn from my stash to use for this gorgeous pattern. Okay, here we are in my Ravelry stash. And the first thing we're going to do is use the filters. I have 344 entries in here, so I'm not just going to scroll through them and try and find what I'm looking for. I'm going to use the filters so I can pull out the closest thing to what I'm looking for this pattern and then narrow it down from there. We know that this pattern requires fingering weight yarn, so we're going to start by going to Select Filters, going to Weight, and then selecting fingering so that it filters out everything that's not fingering weight. The other thing I know about what I'm looking for is that I really like the two-tone light main color, dark border of this. So I'm going to try and duplicate that as much as possible, probably in my blue, green, totally Nicole blue realm, because that's what I like. And stop trying to convince me that I need to knit other colors because totally Nicole blue is what I like, and I get to knit what I want to knit. But thanks for your input. And you could totally keep trying. Someday I might change my mind. So right off the bat, I see here this Momonoki yarn, this Rami silk, which I know also has wool in it because this is a recent acquisition in the colorway Sage. You see how when I hover the cursor over the photo of my yarn, the colorway that I entered pops up? I love Ravelry. I know you might not, but I just want you to see all of the features that it's got because some of them are just mad amazing. I can see that I have more than enough yardage, and I really do like that color for the main color. I'm feeling it already. So let's scroll down now and see if I can find a single skein of something that's going to work with that sage. Scrolling. I'm going to scroll down. This is sorted by yardage. So I'm going to scroll down to where I've got more single skein 400 yard-ish yarns, and voila, look at this baby. This is La Bien-Aimée Merino singles. I have 400 yards of it. The colorway is Jasper. There's a story behind that, and I think that will make the perfect accompaniment to the Momonoki Rami silk. So I'm going to go pull those yarns out of my stash, and then we're going to take a look at them in real life and see if they work as well as they appear to in my Ravelry search. Okay, we got off the Ravelry train, and now we're back in the Nicole Knits station. And oh my God, that's a terrible analogy. Yep, I know, Oscar. I know. You don't have to. Thanks anyway. So I dug through my stash and I found those two yarns. Here's the Rami silk, and it is lovely, and I can definitely feel it as the main color for the mist shawl. The fiber content of this yarn is 60% non-superwash wool, 20% silk, 20% Rami, and Rami is similar to linen. It's shorter fibers than the linen fibers, but very similar. And 100%, I'm loving it. And then here's the Jasper. You can see this is already pre-wound because here's the story. I'm going to digress for a minute here. If you're not interested in the story, skip ahead. This single skein of yarn came to me in a kit a few years back, probably 3 years back, from Espace Tricot, which was full of special yarns specifically dyed in this Jasper colorway or similar colorways to make this shawl. I started knitting it. I didn't love it. The yarns all felt way too special for this particular project. I wasn't all that keen on it. I knew I probably wasn't going to wear it. It had mohair in it, so I definitely wasn't going to wear it. This does not have mohair. This is just straight up 100% merino. And I tried knitting this into something else, and it wasn't working, so I frogged it. And then I tried knitting it into something else, and it wasn't working, so I frogged it. Of course, it's just a single skein, and I was trying to put it into full-on sweater patterns. So anyway, long story short, here it is, frogged a couple of times, still 100% usable and just fine. Don't think your yarn is ruined just because you had to rip back your project. That is a myth. Together, fabulous. I am so excited about this. And because I was talking about grist earlier, and now you're thinking, well, how do they match grist-wise? Because you said that was important. You may recall I said it's not that important for a shawl. I'll explain why in just a minute, when it might be, but in this case, I already know it's not going to be because I'm familiar with how these kinds of yarns knit up. However, the grist on this merino singles is 4. The grist on the Rami silk is 4.25. They are close enough that I have absolutely no issue with putting them together. I actually kind of like the idea that the border yarn is a tiny bit gristier than this, which is going to be the upper part, because it's going to help with the drape of pulling the shawl down. I am going to convert this either crescent or rectangle. I think it's a crescent shape. If you've been around here at all, you know I don't do shawls with ends. So I'm going to convert it to a big rectangle wrap and then sew it up into my wrap over style, like you see behind me right here. And my wrap overs work best when the yarn has good drape. And I know that the weight of the silk and the linen in here is going to give this yarn the drape I need, and the weight of this will help pull it down at the bottom. So all good. These yarns are going to be fantastic together, and I am very excited to knit this. But first, I have to finish the Stephen West shawl I have in progress because it's going to be a beauty too. And if I start a second 360 stitch shawl right now, I'm going to lose my mind. Now let's move on to a couple other examples. Welcome back to the studio. A while back, I came across this ripple jacket pattern by Hinton Stein, and I absolutely loved the neckline. I loved the garter. I loved the rolled up sleeve. I loved everything about it and felt like I had to have this particular jacket in my wardrobe. Now, if you're not familiar with Hinton Stein, she's a genius. I particularly love her sort of soft and wearable but tailored aesthetic in her knits. Fabulous. Part of her genius is that for this particular pattern, she said you can use a worsted or Aran weight, or you could marl 2 fingerings together. So I went to my stash. I did that same process we just did in Ravelry, where I looked at my worsted and Aran weights. There was nothing I had that had enough yardage. So I thought, okay, marling, great idea. I love marling. I have a whole video about marling. Go check it out. And what I found was this light fingering in this color and this solid navy sport weight yarn that I've had forever and have been trying to use for something. Another one of those yarns that I absolutely love the yarn. I did actually knit it into a cardigan once, but something about it just didn't work, so I didn't wear it. That's it right there. If you're curious about the whole story, you can go to my Ravelry entry for that cardigan and take a look. But I had a feeling that these two together were going to make a pretty cool fabric for that ripple jacket. Here they are, marled together into a skein. And here's the swatch. They're pretty fabulous, right? So have I knit this yet? No. But it's bundled together, it's swatched, I know what needle to use, I've got the yarns ready. I just need to bring it up in my queue and get it knit. Successful stash shop. And I'm getting to use up some very dated yarn from my stash. And then the last one I wanted to talk about was this Bloom sweater that I'm wearing. This is Bloom by Julie Hoover. This was a knit along about 1.5 years ago. Called for sport weight yarn. I didn't have enough of anything to knit this, so I really got creative with the stash shopping. The knit along was starting very quickly after I discovered it, and I just wanted to get going. So I dug through my stash, and it took me a few tries, but eventually I came up with this. So this is actually 3 different yarns cobbled together to make this fantastic pullover. There's Manos del Uruguay Serena in kind of what they call, I think they called it oyster. I can't remember what the colorway is. Anyway, it was a beautiful yarn, but not a color I could really wear on its own. So I marled it with a lace weight in a lovely medium green, and it just made this really nice fabric that's more wearable for me. I still didn't have enough of the Manos del Uruguay to do the whole garment, but I did have a smidge, a couple of small skeins of this heathered gray cashmere. And honestly, I thought it was a long shot that it was going to work together. I knew I would need to do the sleeves in the gray, but to tie it together with the rest of the project, I also put it on the trim around the neck and the bottom. And then there was already this seam down the middle of this sweater. So I decided to use the gray for the last couple of stitches on each of the panels, and when it seamed up, it made this lovely ridge. And I really wasn't sure about it, even when I was near finished it, but I tried it on. I was like, this is kind of cool. So here it is. Yet another successful pattern first stash shop. And of course, it could happen that you find all but one necessary component for that must knit project. So you may need or want to augment your stash 100% without shame or judgment and head out to your local yarn store or your favorite online resource. You might be missing a contrast color. You might need 200 more yards, meters of something complementary. You absolutely have permission to buy what you need to use what you have. That's not stash growth, that's stash empowerment. I know I'm cheeky. My grandpa said so. All right, now for scenario number 2. You found a gorgeous skein or 2 or 3, and now what? Now you want to know, what can I do with this yarn? This is one of the questions I get asked the most. I have this great yarn. I don't know what to do with it. So we're going to start by finding a pattern that matches the limitations of that gorgeous skein of yarn that you have. Or skeins, or boxful. Again, for the purposes of demonstration, we're going to go to Ravelry and do a search, but this time we're going to focus on the properties of the yarn that we're doing the search for, and we're going to be looking for a pattern. So instead of searching in the stash, we're searching in the patterns, and we can filter by yardage, weight, or fiber. Or you can filter by patterns you already have in your library if you don't want to spend any bucks on a new pattern. The yardage filter in Ravelry is a bit tricky because it pulls from the whole range of yardage requirements for that pattern, not just the size that you're likely to make. So the range can vary wildly. It works much better for accessories than sweaters. But the very easiest way is to look for patterns designed for your yarn or projects others have made successfully with your yarn. So let's put this into practice. I have this Mayak baby yak yarn in my stash. I have some leftovers in 2 colors. We're going to go to Ravelry and we're going to see if we can find something that I can make and use these up. All right, here we are back in Ravelry, but this time we are on the pattern search page. And the very first thing I'm going to do is type in the name of the yarn and see if there are any patterns designed specifically for this yarn, which is Mayak Baby Yak. Go. And right away I can see there are a number of delightful patterns using the Mayak Baby, including, who could have known? Baby yak mitts. Let's open this up and take a look. And okay, I cheated. You can see that I already ran this search because I've already linked my scraps of baby yak yarn to this pattern. But just humor me for a minute and pretend like I haven't done that. So we're going to scroll down on this pattern and we're going to find out what the yardage is. This pattern requires 2 colors. That's what I have, is 2 colors. 80 to 115 yards of color A and 65 to 100 yards of color B. Both of them in worsted weight, which is what this Mayak Baby is. And if you look at my stash entries, you'll see that I have remaining 125 yards of the burgundy and 100 yards left of the navy blue. So I have enough of both of these colors and this yarn to pretty much use up every last scrap of it that I have left over from other projects. Perfect. And my other option for this type of search would have been to start with my stash entry, go to the main page for that yarn, and then search the projects for that yarn. You can see over here under About This Yarn, there are 2,633 projects. I could click on that, have a browse through here, and this is where I may want to filter this down. I could use this filter knowing I only have a small amount and filter by pattern category, knowing that it's going to be accessories and it's probably going to either be a hat or hands. There's a hat filter and a hands filter, and I could scroll through this way and see what might work. Or I could go to the advanced page, scroll down, and filter by meterage. I have mine set to meterage. You may have yours set to yardage. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Just use the one that works best for you. And I know for both of these that I only have together somewhere between 150 and 300 meters. So I'll select that. You see that this has now reduced me down to 400 patterns, which sounds like a lot, but I can scroll through 400 patterns pretty quickly. So we'll just have a look. There's a possibility of slippers. There are lots of hats. I could two-tone the hats. I don't know how this sweater got in here. You see what I mean? Like, how does a whole sweater only take 150 to 300 meters? Something's off there. There's a 2-color hat. And then, of course, the other filter is to limit it to worsted, which doesn't really change our number very much because we already started with the Mayak medium. So you can see if you can't find a pattern specifically designed for that yarn, you can use filter parameters and narrow it down to something that would work. And keep in mind that these are Ravelry users' projects. These are not the actual pattern pages. You'd have to click on these and then go to the link to the actual pattern to see the full pattern information. Okay, we got a good grasp of how that works and how to do that. Excellent. All right, so we already talked a bit about blending yarns and marling to help make what you've got in your stash work for a particular pattern. But let's talk a little bit more about color blocking, which is what's happening here. Because color blocking may be the way that you can take a few of your yarns that you don't have full project or sweater quantities of and make them work together in a pattern you really like. So this method is sort of, it could go either way. It could be you've got the pattern and now you're looking for yarns and you're going to have to color block some different yarns to make it work for that pattern. Or it might be that you've got some yarns in the same brand or type in a few different colors and together they make up a sweater quantity and now you're going to look for a pattern. This could go either way, but let's talk about how to make color blocking thoughtful and not chaotic. First of all, it's a good idea to make sure you've got coordinating solids or tonal semi-solids. I've got some inspiration and some good design examples for you. For starters, check out Tin Can Knit's Bestie hoodie, scarf, and hats. They're all balanced, intentional color block changes. Pearl Soho patterns are also an excellent source of color blocking ideas. And bonus, many of their patterns are free on their website. Some great examples of how to do color blocking are the Prism blanket, the Good Morning blanket, or even the So Simple It's Genius in the Twist cowl. Here's some more tips for color blocking. Keep the saturation level of each yarn consistent. So avoid pairing pastel colors with jewel tones, for example. Use one lead color to tie all the sections together. And consider placement. Usually darker colors on the bottom of a garment and lighter colors up top is flattering. But remember that wherever you put the lightest color, that's where your eye's going to go first. So keep that in mind. All right, here are a few general tips for how to shop from your stash. When you're doing your stash entries, you can add, whether it's in a notebook or in Ravelry, you could add tags to that yarn with potential project ideas like sock, shawl, sweater quantity. You can use color A, neutral, contrast tags to help you with color planning. You could host a stash tasting or stash inspiration party with your knitting group. Just get together, lay out all your partial balls and orphan skeins, and just get each other's ideas and play and swatch while you're there. Swatching is a perfect social knitting. Way more fun with company. You could try striping, you could test fade sequences. You could also challenge yourself by adding constraints. So you could say, I'm going to make a sweater without buying anything new. I'm going to use up 3 single skeins before I buy a set. I'm going to use 2 stash skeins for every newly purchased skein. And here's another tip. You can let your pattern preferences, your pattern loves, your pattern favorites influence how you store your yarn. And I know you may already do this because you've told me so in the comments in other videos. For instance, you can group your yarns by likely use, sock, sweater, shawl, not just by weight or color. That way, when a new pattern grabs you, you're already halfway to a match. And of course, we might get to the, in case of emergency, break the glass and go yarn shopping. Sometimes, despite your best intentions, you will need to buy yarn. And that is okay, even encouraged. Just make sure that if you're concerned about your stash getting out of control, make sure it's supporting your stash busting goals and not sabotaging them. If you need 1 skein to turn 4 into a finished object, excellent, that's a good deal. If you need 1 skein and it comes home with 5 friends, no. Back away and alert the stash police. Your stash doesn't want to be admired, it wants to be knit. Well, okay, it totally does want to be admired, but it also wants to be knit. And frankly, so do you. Be admired, that is. So shop your stash first, start where you are, and see what magic you can make without adding a single skein. But if you do buy more, tag me. I want to see. And tell us all about your stash shopping methods and stories. How's your stash management project going so far this year? Personally, I still have a lot of work to do. I know I have lots of yarn around here that is not properly in my inventory. And as always, here's the link to the playlist for the previous 8 episodes in case you need to catch up. I say goodbye. Oscar says goodbye. Needles up. Stash down. Bye.